Now for our last story, we're going to talk a little bit about race, which is something that I don't think that I ever learned about too much in class. It's something that I think that most of us learn about through life experience and through meeting other people. But not our next storyteller. Our next storyteller, Ingrid Wiese, is going to tell you a story about the lessons that she learned both inside and outside the classroom during an African American Studies class. So please put your hands together and bring up Ingrid Wiese.
Hello. Hi, my name is Ingrid Wiese. And I wanted to tell you a story about when I was a freshman in college and took my first African American Studies class. But you need to know, first of all, that I went to the University of Washington, which has a very low population of African Americans. And at the University of Washington, although there were 20,000 students, there were only 5,000 African American students. All of them were taking this African American 101 class with me. I mean, it was such a large class that they had to open 3 classrooms. And being the good student that I was, I showed up early, sat in the front row, and had I taken a moment to look back behind me, I would have noticed that I was only one of 2 white students in the class. And as I started to take the class, sitting up in the front, trying to make eye contact with the professor, he started to tell me about the history of his people, and I began to get a little bit confused. He was telling me about our founding fathers, and you know, I was born in Washington, D.C. to a mother and a father who are got engaged at the Jefferson Memorial, would go back and visit the Abraham Lincoln Memorial every time they were going to have a kid, which was 7 times, by the way. And I had been told these stories about these wonderful founding fathers and believed very strongly in them and the legacy they left behind. So imagine my surprise when Dr. Brown was standing up in front of me and telling me that there may be another interpretation to the history that I had learned. And in fact, I felt the need to correct him. So, upon telling me that perhaps Abraham Lincoln did not just free the slaves because he was a good person, I raised my hand. Excuse me, Dr. Brown, I think you're confused. You see, this is what really happened. And he listened and he said, okay, thank you, Ingrid, that's your name, right? Okay. And then he went on to talk about Jefferson being a slave owner. And I don't think he understood that while Jefferson owned slaves, he was really nice to them. So, you know, he let them live in these little communities. And so I raised my hand, Dr. Brown, I don't think you understand. And I also shared with him the story that my parents had actually got engaged at the Jefferson Memorial. And that's why I felt like perhaps he should be a little more gentle on Jefferson. And again, I had my back to the rest of the room, which was 300 to 500 people back, and I didn't hear the grumbling sound that was kind of coming up behind me. So after class, I did ask 8 questions, which, by the way, were the only questions asked during the 3-hour lecture, and they were mostly thinly veiled comments about how his historical accuracy was a bit off. So as I was leaving, I turned around to face the rest of the crowd, and there was this group of women there that were very true to their African American heritage and only wore like African clothing, beads, and like kept their heads completely shaved, and they were like known, even the other African American women in class had respect for these ladies, and they were pissed. And the leader of the group, her name was Miko, and she kind of came up to me after class as I was there packing up my Trapper Keeper, and she pushed me kind of up against the wall, got real close, like in my face, and she's like, I have spent the last 25 years of my life listening to your people's history. If you're going to take my class, you can sit down, shut up, and listen to mine. And then she walked off. And I was so embarrassed because class had really not dissipated yet, and everybody could hear her, and I was like mortified. I was like, I had to sit at the back of the class for like the next week, which is horrible if you're like an overachiever type A person who likes to come early, stay late, go to all the office hours. So I started to get really concerned for my safety. I was wondering if I was going to need an escort in and out of class. I mean, every day I would sit there in the back of the class, and I would see Miko lean over to one of her girlfriends, and they would all look back and start laughing. And so imagine my shock when Dr. Brown explained that we would all have to do group projects. And I should mention that I wasn't doing well in this class. And I was kind of one of those straight A students that did well in every class, and I was getting like B minuses, probably because of my historical accuracy issue, but I was really upset. Like on the test, he would ask these questions about my founding fathers, and I would just tell him what I knew. And apparently those answers were wrong. If I'd read the literature, I might have known that. But and so I really needed to do well on this final project. And he says, okay, you have to do it in groups of 2. And I know this is a shock to everybody, but nobody wanted to be my partner. And so Dr. Brown looks down and he says, Miko and Ingrid, together. I was like, oh, shit. I mean, shucks. And I was really concerned about it. So Miko and I met up in a very neutral spot outside of the classroom for our first discussion. And most of the time when I met with her, probably for the first 10 times I met with her, she had this thing going on. And there I was with my like trapper keeper like this, taking notes, feeling really, really vulnerable and bad. And she's like, well, first off, you need to be educated. And I said, okay. She's like, what are you doing this Sunday? I'm like, sleeping in until noon. She said, you're coming with me to the Zion Church. I was like, okay. So we go to the Zion Church, and I have probably the most spiritual experience of my life, as I am tears rolling down my face, rocking on my way to some Baptist hymn, and I look around, and she wouldn't sit with me in the row because she didn't want anyone to think we were together. So she made me sit up front by myself, but I found it totally moving, and it was awesome. And she brought her little daughter, and we just had this great time. We went out and we had like soul food for lunch afterwards, and she introduced me to her whole extended family. And then she says, what are you doing this Friday? And I said, probably studying. I mean, it's Friday. There's only 2 days in the weekend. When else am I going to get it done? And she said, you're coming with me to this dance on Friday night. I'm going to be there. I may not say hi when you come in, but you're going to meet me there. So we go to this little club, and Washington is just not a really hopping place for a burgeoning African-American community. So there are only like 2 clubs in the whole city that are spinning any kind of, well, that have any kind of a crowd there, and that isn't just predominantly white. So when I walked into the club, I was at one of those 2 spots on that Friday night, and I was, again, the only white person in the club. So I'm doing my thing, you know, I'm dancing away, and Miko's brother comes up to me because Miko wouldn't go near me, and he says, Miko wants me to explain to you how we dance. And I was like, what are you talking about? I look so cute right now, everybody's watching. And he said, no. He's like, so he tells me to close my eyes and pretend that I'm, you know, having an intimate moment. And I'm like, I've never had one of those. I don't know what to do. He says, I'll show you. So we're sitting there, and I'm closing my eyes, and my movements kind of change around a little, and I must have been slightly doing something right, because Miko did come up and start talking to me. So she then said to me, what are you doing this next Tuesday night? And I was like, I don't know, studying? And she said, well, no, you're coming with me to the step show. So her and I go to this stadium filled with somewhere around 3,000 people, and we watch the most incredible dance display, and I'm very excited. I especially was excited with all of these. It was an entire, like a black fraternity, sorority, dance mix off thing. I'm looking at some of you who probably are embarrassed at my description of this, but nonetheless, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty incredible to watch. It's kind of like seeing Michael Jackson. It was like so awe-inspiring that people could move this way, could talk this way. So I, of course, tried out some of the new sounds I was hearing, which is apparently a big no-no. You do not make the sound of a black sorority unless you are in the black sorority. And Miko had to move again 2 rows down from me because she was mortified that I was trying out my sui or whatever it was, that I was with my little pinky up. She's like, oh God, no, you're not doing this. So at the end of this little thing, she decided I was slightly educated enough that we could finally work together, and we decided to do this oral history project. And we decided we would ask all the inappropriate questions that were race-related to one another, and we would put it all on tape. And then we would edit it and present it to the class. So Miko asked me questions like this. She said, you know why we wear lotion, right? I was like, What are you talking about? Yeah, we gotta wear lotion. Because if we didn't wear lotion, our legs would be scaly and dry, and you have to wear lotion. It's like, you will not find a black woman who does not have lotion in her purse. I had no idea. She also told me that when white people get wet, they smell like dogs. I did not know this. She also explained to me that she could never see an African American man with a white woman because he would never understand her hair. And I didn't get this. I was like, this is really eye-lifting. I also asked her a couple questions, you know. I went through but mine are pretty basic and boring, and we talked a little bit more about interracial relationships. She talked a little bit more to me about what it was like to be a black woman in a school where almost everybody was white, and the only place that you could really come together was in your little groups, in your lunchroom, in the classroom. And at the end, we took our project to Dr. Brown, me hoping desperately for at least a B+ this time. And Dr. Brown collected them all, and he stood up at the front of the class, and he said, "We only have one A project in the group. And I'd like Miko and Ingrid to come up here right now." And he gave us this big fat A, which erased all my B minuses, so I was thrilled. And I was definitely thrilled when Miko asked me to be the godmother of her child 5 years later. So that's it for me. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ingrid, and thanks to everybody who joined us for this set of stories. We do have one more set of stories that's going to come up at 4 o'clock. So you've got 20 minutes to get a drink and get out of the sun for a minute, and then come back here at 4 o'clock for the last set of stories. The theme for that is emancipation. So come back in 20 minutes for that.